Welcome back to another episode of the Point of Attack show here on the Right Way Sports Network's YouTube channel. I am your host, as always, Thomas Stapleton, joined by my co-host, Pranav Sriraman. We hope you guys all had a happy holidays. Today, we are going to talk about a little bit about the MVP race because this is probably one of the closest MVP races in recent memory. We have, I would say, probably 6 guys at the top who have pretty reasonable MVP cases with Jason Tatum, Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, and Luka Doncic. And we could even have a 7th if Steph Curry was healthy. But there's just the point is the top of the NBA is so stacked right now. So we're going to talk about, as of right now, who would we have as the MVP frontrunner? And I think me and Pranav both agree that this is not easy by any means. But a lot of these guys are very deserving of the award. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to have to narrow it down to one. So just at this point in the season, because we are about 35 games through the way, a little more, a little less. So Pranav, I will kick this off to you right now. Who is your MVP?
Yeah, so you mentioned it when you introduced the show. I mean, this is probably one of the closest MVP races we have ever seen. I mean, you have 6 and probably 7 guys when Steph was healthy who are all right there in terms of fighting for that MVP award. And it's by the time the show gets published, my opinion can change. That's how close this award is. It could change in a night span. But as of right now, the way I'm feeling, I'm going to lean, and keep in mind, this is all very close between a group of 6 to 7 guys. I'm going to very closely lean Nikola Jokic. And that's a boring answer considering the fact that, he's won it back to back. He's been the guy that everyone doesn't want to see win it again. People have questioned him, and there are valid questions about him. But one thing you can't deny is what he does every single year. He's so consistent. And another thing you can't deny is that he's one of the best offensive players the sport has ever seen. I mean, he has truly mastered the offensive end. There was initial questions about could he ever become a premier volume scorer? He's efficient, but could he ever elevate his volume to the level of the likes of the true superstars in the league? Since the 2019-20 season, he's only continued to improve upon that, and he's only become more efficient, which seems weird considering the fact that he was already at an absurdly efficient, he was scoring at an absurdly efficient rate, and that somehow continues to get better at a higher volume and at a higher efficiency. I mean, this year he's scoring like nearly 26 a game on 69% true shooting. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves in that area. I mean, he's so versatile. He could shoot from the mid-range. He's such an effective shooter from nearly every area of the court, and his post game is the best in the league, arguably. I mean, it is the best in the league. And I mean, as a scorer, he's the best in the league in the post. And you can make the argument that he's probably the most effective scorer in the league right now. And that's not even considering what he does as a playmaker. I mean, you can argue that not only is he the best scorer this season, he's the best playmaker this season. I mean, he's elevating this Nuggets offense to levels that we haven't seen other than him. I mean, he does this year in and year out, and he somehow gets better, which is weird. But I mean, the level of open shots that he generates, and it's not just the scoring gravity in the post. I mean, that's not the only way he creates. I mean, just walking up the court, he's able to process what's going on so fast, and he probably makes the best deliveries out of anyone who's ever lived as a passer. And so just that ability alone has generated so many open shots. I mean, you watch a Nuggets game, and without him on the court, it's like, please get him back on the court. And I get it. I mean, we talked about it before the show. Jokic's on-off numbers might be a bit inflated because of the lack of a good replacement big behind him. Shout out DeAndre Jordan. But but I mean, we talked about it a bit before. It's not necessarily all in the stats, but just watching the Nuggets game, I mean, this goes for all great players, so it's not something that's inclusive to Jokic. But I mean, like when he's not on the floor, they're missing his scoring a ton. He's their best scorer, and no one else outside of maybe Jamal Murray and sometimes Michael Porter Jr., who could hit tough shots over anyone at any given time, can really create their own offense. And even then, for those guys, they're not getting as high quality looks without the Joker on the floor. So for me, it's very close. All these guys have close arguments. And I'm not sure I'll buy this argument moving down the line, but as of right now, I'm feeling that Nikola Jokic is the league MVP, just because of the offensive brilliance he continues to show at a historic level on a night in, night out, and a year in, year out basis.
Yeah, I mean, no complaints from me here. At the beginning of the season, I talked about Jokic possibly three-peating, which at the time felt like a hot take because like I was looking at like betting sites and he was like fourth or fifth in the odds rankings, and I was like, what are we doing here? This is the two-time MVP who just is utterly dominant in every fashion. So I didn't really understand why it was such a hot take to have him three-peating, but I don't hate that at all. But I actually think so far my MVP pick would be Luka Doncic for the simple fact that he has been the best player in the NBA so far this season, in my opinion. I know a lot of people are going to look at the Mavericks' record and point to that as kind of the fault as to why they Dallas is not good enough for Luka to be considered MVP. I think that is so flawed on so many different things. First of all, the Mavericks are only 3.5 games out of first, and they're only 2.5 games out of third place. So realistically, they're not that far back from the Pelicans, the Nuggets, the Grizzlies, these teams that, sit at the top. The Clippers just lost again tonight, so that's another team up top that's just going to keep piling down. Like I would bet that the Mavericks climb to at least, 4 or 5. And I simply think Luka has been the best player so far this season. He's been unreal as a scorer. I mean, obviously we saw the other day the 60-20-10 game, which is one of the greatest
game I've ever seen. It's the best game I've ever seen. Yeah,
one of the greatest individual games that this sport has ever seen. He has been just unreal as a scorer so far. 34 points per game. 62 true shooting. He was in like a 3-point slump at the beginning of the year and has now worked his way up back to 36% from 3. Obviously, we know, but the foundation of his game, his scoring game, comes from his driving, just his footwork, his craft, his strength. He's just a dominant presence at the rim. He gets to the rim at will. He's so strong. He's one of the best finishers in the league. And on top of that, he is shooting volume threes and finally hitting them at a league average rate. And on top of that, I also think he's probably the best passer and arguably playmaker in the sport. I mean, 8.8 assists per game, I feel like I don't think that really represents how good of a passer he truly is. The way he is able to manipulate, him and Jokic are very similar in that way. The way they are able to read and process defenses so quickly and so efficiently. And they both their eye manipulation is just incredible. They are able to look off passes and just make quick decisions with the ball. Luka is more of a pound the ball and just run pick and rolls until you can find an advantage, while Jokic is more of a quicker facilitator. But in the same sense of just like how they process defenses and how they read the game, I think they're very similar in that aspect. I just think because Luka has been the best player so far, I don't think it's a valid enough argument for them to be 3.5 games out of first place and Luka to not be the MVP favorite. On top of that, like, look at this roster. Like I'm pretty sure we talked about it a few weeks ago, but this roster is not good. Like Christian Wood is like your second leading scorer right now, and he's a fine scorer, but like Christian Wood should not be the second best player.
We talked about how they might have been wasting his career.
Yeah, we talked about it, how they might be wasting his career. Like literally, look at this roster. They just have a bunch of guys who fill solid roles, but like that's not
level guys. They're replacement level guys on roster.
Exactly. Every single player outside of Luka has replaceable production, and I know that's a really, really hard thing to hear. But there is not a single player outside of Luka on this roster who I'm like, oh, they need to keep long term. Like no one. Like Dinwiddie's been solid, but he racks up a ton of points in garbage time and puts up a lot of fake stats. I think he's a solid player. I don't think he's anywhere near as good as like 17 and 5 on 42% from 3 would suggest. And Christian Wood's very similar in that sense. He's a very, very poor defender. So this Mavericks roster has a ton of holes, and I understand the Nuggets roster isn't perfect either. But I just think that with the fact that Luka's been the best player in the NBA, in my eyes so far, I just think you should give him MVP because I don't think the gap between the Mavericks and the top teams is that great of a thing to really kick Luka out of the race.
Yeah, I understand having Luka as the best player in the NBA. I mean, that might be my take as well. But to me, it's how far has he separated himself as being the best player in the NBA this season? That's really where it comes to, because to me, this MVP race, I don't think it's weird to say because I picked a guy, but I don't think anyone has truly separated themselves from the pack. It's not like
I agree.
a year where one guy is unanimously better than the other. And to me, I think Luka's argument shapes up a lot like what Jokic's argument was last year, where his roster was depleted of Murray, Porter Jr., and they still found a way to succeed, mostly due to him being on the court. And I think that, seeing that from Jokic last year and him doing the same thing this year when those guys are back, and the Nuggets offense still being just as effective, and him having the scoring production that he's having, just elevating his game to new heights, and me seeing that he's done the floor raising job, done the ceiling raising job. To me, that he's been the most valuable player, just the levels that he's elevated this Nuggets offense with or without, regardless of the personnel that's on the floor.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. Here's the thing I'll say, though, is that you pointed out how Luka's season is very similar to Jokic's last season, where you're talking about the depletion of the roster. And Jokic won MVP. So I feel like if we're using the same logic here, I think that should apply for Luka as well. And the sad thing is that Luka's roster isn't even depleted. It's just bad.
It's just bad. It's just bad.
He doesn't have like Jamal Murray and Michael Porter waiting to come back from injury. He doesn't even have that. This roster is just not good on its own.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. So you think that Luka's argument is similar to Jokic's argument, but he hasn't quite separated himself. What do you think will it take for him to separate himself in this debate, or do you not ever seeing one guy separate themselves?
I really think it's tough to say someone's going to separate themselves with everyone playing at the level that they are. I mean, like Durant's been playing at an unreal level this season. Giannis feels like another very similar, like a boring pick, but he's been incredible as well. Joel Embiid puts up crazy stat lines. The other night when Luka put up 60, 20, and 10, Embiid had like 45 and 15 or something, and no one even
in the night and on Christmas, Jokic had like a 40-point triple double.
Yeah, the stats are just crazy. I think just all it is for Luka, I think, is really just sustaining this.
The roster.
The roster, but also just being able to sustain these numbers, because I don't really see a flaw in his case. I mean, unless like Dallas were to take a turn for the worst, because even though my criteria is different, I recognize that the MVP voting is largely team record plays a large factor.
Right.
But even so, I think just being able to sustain these numbers and finding a little bit more success, it really doesn't take a lot of a success to be a top seed in the West right now. Like the Clippers are the 4th seed.
It's a horrible conference.
It's not great. Like Memphis has been struggling a bit as of recent. The Pelicans and Nuggets are legitimately good, but are they am I positive they're going to hold down the number 1 and number 2 spot? No. The Clippers are not a really great roster outside of Paul George. I mean, they have some good role players. They have guys who, know how to do their job. Tyronn Lue's a fantastic coach, but this is not the teams ahead of them, like the Suns, who've been riddled with injuries, the Kings, these are not teams that I'm the Mavericks, there's no chance they're able to pass them. So all I think it really needs is for them to find, sustained success for just a little bit of a stretch of time, and Luka's sustaining these numbers. I really don't think it's that hard for Luka to be able to separate himself if he is able to keep up these numbers.
Right. To me, it's the fact that, Luka's roster is obviously worse, no doubt. But I think that they're providing the same, or I think Jokic is providing a little bit more impact this year because of the scoring gap. And to me, that's really what makes him. And it feels weird to argue against Luka right now.
Yeah.
It really does, because he's been so, I said he had the best performance I've ever seen the other night. And so it feels really weird, but I just feel that Jokic has added a bit more on offense this year, as weird as that is to say. But I mean, as far as the other candidates go, I mean, I had Jokic, you had Luka. Are there candidates like, an Embiid who's leading the league in scoring, Tatum, who's been arguably the best two-way player in the league this season, and Giannis being Giannis, KD having arguably his best scoring season at this age? Are there other candidates that you would make the case for, and who would they be?
I mean, obviously Tatum, Durant, those guys you all just mentioned, I think I could very easily make a case for. If there's like a dark horse guy that I would kind of make a case for, I wrote about this. Pascal Siakam. I think, like, again, Raptors have not been good this season, and unlike the Mavericks, they have a lot of ground to make up to get into the upper echelon of the East. But Pascal Siakam is putting up numbers that are like better than LeBron James's right now, and I don't see anyone talking about it
because he's the better player.
I'm not even going to touch that yet. But Siakam has been absolutely insane on both ends of the floor. I mean, 27, 7, and 9 speaks for itself, I feel like. But he's been one of the best drivers in basketball. He's always been an above average playmaker for his position, but he's gone from above. Yeah, went from above average to elite for his position. He's just like a legit offensive hub. Like he is. I'm kind of running out of things to say because Siakam's case is going to be completely ruined by the fact that his team
the league is so talented too.
Yeah, the league is so talented and his team isn't good, but Siakam is literally putting up numbers that are rivaling LeBron James's right now.
If the league wasn't so talented too, I think that Zion Williamson would have a very legit MVP case. I mean, the Pelicans record-wise, they're like near number 1 in the West. He's having another incredibly efficient scoring season. His playmaking has gotten better and his defense has gotten better, and yet he's not an MVP candidate because of how damn talented this league is.
Exactly. And Zion, I feel like Zion should be I feel like he's got a lot of things on his side. Obviously, they're the number 1 seed in the West, but he's got the narrative on his side. Like first time winner, comes back off a season where he doesn't play, and then absolutely
and Ingram hasn't played. Ingram hasn't played.
Like he has a lot of things going on his side, like in his favor with the narrative. And with the team record, those are things that the media factors heavily when voting for this award. And he just does not get mentioned in MVP discussions at all. I was going to bring him up as well. Even John Morant. Jaren Jackson's been out been out half the season. Desmond Bane's been out half the season. And Memphis is still the 3 seed because Ja has been simply excellent on the offensive end. But again, you're not going to hear about a lot of these guys because 1, the top 6 are insane, and 2, because it's just I feel like it's already set in stone that it's never gonna go to Pascal Siakam.
It's never gonna. Maybe one day it goes to Zion, but not today.
No. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's gonna wrap up today's episode. Appreciate you guys listening as always. If you're new to the channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Comment who you think is MVP.
Yeah, comment down below who you guys think is the MVP. I mean, I had trouble before the show, during the show, deciding who my MVP is, and I still do have trouble. So,
it's we certainly want to hear who you guys think because, like we said, there are so many good candidates to pick from. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in as always, and we will catch you guys next week.
Peace.